when a choice reshapes an empire. It began with a decision so private, so deeply personal, that no one beyond a single room knew it had been made. Yet that choice would ripple outward, slowly at first, then with the force of a rising tide, until it reshaped the future of an entire empire. For one sheik, this moment was not born from strategy or ambition. It emerged from a fracture inside him, a collision between responsibility and desire, one powerful enough to alter the course of history. To understand why this choice mattered, we must enter a world where personal decisions rarely stay personal. In the realm of royalty, every thought carries weight, every action becomes precedent, and every hesitation is studied by eyes trained to read meaning in silence. A single decision can strengthen a dynasty or unravel it thread by thread. He was a man admired for discipline, composure, and an almost uncanny ability to remain steady in chaos. Yet beneath that stillness lived a struggle few ever saw. For years, he had carried a burden that grew heavier with each expectation placed upon him. The belief that he must sacrifice every part of himself for the sake of the empire, duty above comfort, legacy above longing, stability above self. The fracture appeared when he met someone who challenged that belief simply by existing. She was not of royal lineage, not woven into the political fabric of the kingdom. She entered his life with no agenda, no performance, no awareness of the world her presence threatened to shake. Their connection was immediate, unmistakable, and impossible. He felt seen in a way he never had before, understood without explanation, valued not for his name, but for the person hidden beneath it. But love, in a world built on alliances, is rarely simple. The moment he allowed himself to acknowledge his feelings, he felt the full force of what such a choice would mean. Advisors would object, elders would resist, families would fracture. The empire, always watchful, would react with scrutiny that bordered on cruelty. Yet for the first time in his life, he questioned whether living solely for the expectations of others was truly living at all. Still, he tried to bury the feeling. He immersed himself in work, in ceremony, in responsibility. But the more he tried to suppress it, the more it became the quiet flame that illuminated everything he once accepted without question. The choice that would reshape the empire had already begun forming inside him. But when the world around him sensed a shift, forces he had never imagined would rise. Some determined to protect him, others determined to stop him, and the first fault line in the empire's foundation would begin to crack. The first signs of tension appeared quietly, woven into everyday conversations that felt suddenly heavier than before. Advisors grew more attentive, watching him with the subtle intensity of people searching for answers they feared to ask. His schedule shifted without explanation. Meetings added, travel extended, responsibilities rearranged as though someone believed distraction might pull him back into a version of himself they understood. But the truth could not be hidden. Those closest to him sensed a change in his demeanor. He was thoughtful where he once was decisive, distant where he once was predictable. And in a world where every gesture is interpreted, even the smallest shift becomes a signal. Word spread through the palace with the speed of whispered fire. Not the details, no one knew her name, her face, or the depth of what bound them, but the possibility. The possibility that the heir whose path had always seemed unshakable was considering a choice that defied tradition. The elders reacted first. Their concern was framed as wisdom, their objections wrapped in history. They reminded him of alliances forged through marriage, of unity built through lineage, of the delicate balance an empire must maintain. Their tone was respectful, yet unyielding. To them, love was a luxury that rulers earned only after securing stability, not before. Advisors followed soon after, each urging caution in their own way. Some feared political consequences. Others feared public reaction. A few, whose loyalties were tied to long-standing alliances, feared the collapse of arrangements crafted over decades. None spoke of the woman herself. They spoke only of what she represented, disruption. But beneath their concerns simmered something deeper, a fear that if he chose his heart over tradition, he might also choose autonomy over their influence. The pressure intensified when his family intervened. Their approach was gentler, shaped by love rather than strategy. His mother asked if he understood the life he was risking. His siblings asked if he had thought through the storm that would follow. His father, a man who rarely revealed emotion, simply asked one question: "Are you prepared to cost?" He wasn't sure. Not yet. In the quiet moments between obligations, he found himself torn. The life expected of him stretched forward in a straight, predictable line, secure, respected, unchallenged. The life he imagined with her was uncertain, precarious, full of shadows and light. Yet it was also real in a way nothing else had ever been. He tried to distance himself, believing time might cool what he felt. But distance only intensified the truth he had tried to ignore. The more he stepped away, the more he realized how profoundly she had shifted the axis of his world. And with every attempt to suppress the feeling, the fracture inside him deepened. Then came a moment he could not ignore. A high-ranking advisor, believing he was protecting the dynasty, approached him with a plan, an arranged engagement to a foreign royal, a political alliance designed to quell rumors and reinforce tradition. The advisor spoke confidently, as though the decision were already inevitable. The prince listened in silence. Then, for the first time in his life, he said no. The refusal sent shockwaves through the palace. It was the first concrete sign that he might defy the path chosen for him. And the quiet war that had been building beneath the surface suddenly surged into motion. Pressures mounting, alliances shifting, and the empire bracing for a choice powerful enough to redefine everything it thought it understood. The shadows were closing in, and he knew the next step he took would shape not only his future, but the future of the empire itself. The refusal fractured the calm that had held the palace together for generations. Advisors who once spoke with measured confidence now whispered urgently behind closed doors. Elders convened private meetings without informing him. Even distant relatives, those who rarely involved themselves in governance, began sending messages filled with caution, pleading, warning. A single word had shifted the balance of an empire, revealing how fragile its harmony truly was. He felt the pressure tightening around him like an invisible grip. Schedules that once flowed smoothly now felt orchestrated to keep him away from influence. Conversations ended abruptly when he entered a room. Deference remained, but warmth faded. He was being handled, not heard. What unsettled him most was not the opposition. It was a realization that those who claimed to protect the empire did not trust him to shape its future. As the tension escalated, the palace prepared a response cloaked in ceremony. A gathering of the ruling council was announced, framed as a discussion on heritage and continuity. But everyone understood its true purpose: to confront him openly, to pressure him into reversing his decision, to remind him that his life did not belong to him alone. The night before the council met, he found himself unable to sleep. He walked through the silent corridors, past portraits of ancestors whose expressions seemed both stern and sympathetic. For generations, they too had lived lives shaped by duty. But had they ever felt this hollow ache beneath the surface? This tension between the life they upheld and the life they were denied? In the quiet of a moonlit courtyard, he allowed himself to imagine a different future. One where power did not demand a sacrifice of the heart. One where leadership was defined not by tradition alone, but by humanity. One where he could serve his people without abandoning the part of himself that felt most alive. But imagination could not protect him from what awaited. The council convened in a chamber heavy with symbolism. Elders sat in carved wooden seats. Advisors lined the walls, and the air hummed with expectation. They spoke first, calm, authoritative, unwavering. They warned of political risks, of unstable alliances, of future struggles his choice could ignite. Their words were framed in duty, but delivered with fear. Not fear for the empire, but fear of change. He listened without interruption, absorbing every argument, every attempt to steer him back into the mold they had crafted for him. Yet with each passing moment, something inside him strengthened. The more they insisted he surrender his autonomy, the clearer he understood why he could not. The turning point arrived when one elder, revered for wisdom, insisted he must let go of his personal desire for the greater good. The phrase struck him like a blade, not because it was harsh, but because it was empty. He realized then that greater good had become a shield the council used to preserve the world they understood, a world where rulers obeyed tradition without question. When he finally spoke, the chamber fell silent. He did not raise his voice or plead his case. Instead, he revealed what none of them had anticipated. He had already informed the woman of the consequences of choosing him, and she had stepped away, believing she was protecting his destiny. His voice wavered, not from weakness, but from the weight of the truth. In that moment, he was no longer a prince defying tradition. He was a man acknowledging the cost of the life he had been born into. The chamber shifted. Some elders softened, others hardened further. But all understood one thing. The conflict was no longer about marriage. It was about a prince awakening to the truth of his identity and questioning whether the empire could accept the version of him he was becoming. The shadows around him deepened. The path ahead grew sharper, and the decision he would make next would determine whether he sacrificed the last fragments of his heart or whether he dared to reclaim them. The chamber remained silent long after his confession. For the first time, the council saw not a prince demanding freedom, but a man standing inside a life that had already cost him more than they understood. The weight of that realization shifted the room, subtly but unmistakably. Duty had shaped him, yes, but loss had defined him, and they were all suddenly aware that the path they insisted he follow had already taken something irreplaceable. Yet politics rarely pauses for pain. One advisor attempted to regain control of the narrative, insisting that personal emotion must never interfere with royal responsibility. Another argued that the sacrifice he had made proved his readiness to lead. Their words were sharp, polished, and utterly disconnected from the truth, beating loudly in his chest. He let them speak. Then, with a quiet resolve none of them had expected, he changed the direction of the conversation entirely. He reminded them that leadership was evolving, that the world outside their walls no longer accepted rulers who lived separate from the people they served. Humanity, not perfection, earned trust. Authenticity, not obedience, fostered loyalty. He explained that the empire could no longer afford a demand that its leaders severed human ties that made them capable of compassion, clarity, and courage. His voice grew stronger as he continued. He told them that the loss he had endured was not proof of his dedication. It was proof of the system's blind insistence on tradition at any cost. And if the next generation of leaders faced the same demands, the empire would eventually break under the weight of its own rigidity. The climax arrived when he declared that he would not allow his life, or the lives of future heirs, to become negotiations between love and legacy. The council stared at him, stunned. For decades, no one had challenged the unspoken rule that personal sacrifice was a foundation of royal stability. He was the first to question whether that sacrifice was truly necessary. What followed was not applause nor outrage, but reflection. The oldest elder, a woman whose influence shaped multiple reigns, rose slowly. For years she had been a guardian of tradition, but now she spoke with unexpected softness. She recalled a time when she, too, had been forced to walk away from the life she wanted. Her voice wavered as she admitted that the pain had never left her, and that she had never questioned whether it should have. Then she did something no one in the room anticipated. She apologized. Her gesture cracked the final layer of resistance. Other elders softened. Advisors shifted uncomfortably, aware that their arguments held less power than they had believed. And for the first time, the council acknowledged that the empire's future required not only discipline, but empathy. In the days that followed, changes unfolded quietly. The unspoken rule that royalty must sacrifice personal happiness was reconsidered. Discussions began about leadership built on choice rather than obligation. The prince's role remained the same, but the expectations surrounding it transformed. One evening, he returned to the courtyard where he had once wrestled with doubt. The air felt different, lighter, clearer. The path before him was still demanding, still heavy with responsibility, but no longer shaped entirely by the shadows of tradition. He could walk it now with truth, not silence, with purpose, not pressure. And though he knew his story carried loss, he also understood that his courage had opened a door for those who would lead after him. He had reshaped an empire not by defying tradition, but by revealing its humanity. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.